Brian.
Today, we are learning basketball with Brian Geisinger. He covers college hoops for the NBA and he covers college hoops, the NBA draft, the Charlotte Hornets with 247 Sports and Sports Channel 8, the co-host of the Buzzbeat Pod, a color commentator for High Point University. He's worked as a scout with SIS Hoops and a writer for ACCSports.com. And he's already been to a few Duke games getting to catch Cooper Flagg here in person. So how are you doing today, Brian?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited to be on with you and talk some hoops here.
No doubt. So what's it like calling these games for High Point? You know, how you've been enjoying being a color commentator so far?
It's a lot of fun. I've been fortunate to get to do it. I did it a couple of seasons ago with High Point, like 2019 through 2021. And I'm back now doing some home games this season for High Point. It's a pretty good mid-major team. They're coached by Alan Huss, who's an excellent coach and was played at Creighton and then was an assistant coach under Greg McDermott at Creighton for a long time. Just sort of like very like Maury ball friendly, analytics minded coach. And they've got a really good team at High Point. So it's fun because they're High Point now compared to what they were when I was calling their games a few years ago is in a much different place in this sort of like post Tubby Smith era. But I've been lucky to get to call some other Big South Conference games, some ACC games on radio for the ACC tournament, or Duke Syracuse for ESPN radio a couple of years ago. UNC Asheville. So getting to see Drew Pember play up close. Again, mostly covering the ACC, but I've been fortunate to get to do some color analysis work with the Big South Conference, which is a pretty darn good league. And just seeing how like college hoops has sort of like transformed underneath the transfer portal. Like the Big South plays an interesting role because one, they take guys on from that leave Power 5 places like High Point's starting power forward, Khaman Hamilton, was at Mississippi State initially. But they also send guys, to some of these other programs. Like Maceo Teague was at Asheville, and then he was on the Baylor team that won a national title a couple of years ago. There's plenty of examples like that, but it's a cool league to be around and just sort of like signifies that the importance of hoops, in the state of North Carolina and how that extends beyond, just the Blue Bloods on Tobacco Road.
Yeah, and one of the announcers on, I think it was a UNC game recently, kind of talked about how the transfer portal has opened up opportunity just to be seen as well, where you might, play for a year in one conference and maybe you play on an in-state game against UNC or Duke and somebody sees that game and they're like, oh, you're ready to switch over. You're playing on the big stage.
The guy who's starting at power forward for Wake Forest this season, Trevon Spillers, he was at App State last year, and then Wake and App played in the NIT. Mm-hmm. Wake beat App, and a couple weeks later, Spillers committed to Wake Forest, which is a program that's done really well in the portal under head coach Steve Forbes. But yeah, calling games is fun just because it's like it's different than probably how you and I normally watch games when we're sitting through and taking a lot of time to like clip plays and that sort of stuff. Everything's moving so fast. You have a different angle looking at the court. But it makes it really fun to put time in watching those teams ahead of the game. So you're sort of understanding the tendencies of Coppin State or Jack called the High Point Jackson State game last weekend. And Mo Williams, former NBA point guard, is the head coach at Jackson State. They almost beat High Point on the road. So you're gonna just sort of like stumble into like fun matchups, and basketball being sort of like such a small world, sometimes getting to see familiar names pop back up is cool. But there's just nothing. I mean, to me, it's the most fun I've ever had doing something around the game of basketball. It's getting to actually like call games, and I'm like very appreciative of the universities and places that have like allowed me, because I'm not a former college player. I'm not a former college coach. Like I'm just I'm a nerd that watches a lot of basketball. So like that's my calling card, and it's cool that occasionally some places will like take a chance on me and make me a part of the the ESPN Plus broadcast or the radio broadcast or whatever. it's fortunate. I'd love to do more of it, honestly, in the future.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I can only imagine how much fun it must be, like basically getting to be an ambassador of whatever school you're calling, an ambassador of the sport in general. Just, I was wondering what that prep kind of looks like, because like you said, it's not as like in-depth, nitty-gritty in the moment, breaking down every single action. You can't really replay things. You just got to see what happens and call it as it is.
Yeah, it's so when I first started doing it in 2019, I would like really over prepare, like I would make too many notes. Like I do remember High Point played Valparaiso in 2019 when Javon Freeman Liberty was at Valparaiso. So it's pretty cool getting to see him, before he would, years before he would turn into an NBA player. But I remember I would make like flashcards for every player, tendencies, stats. I'd have on my computer in front of me, I'd have a Google Doc with notes, and I'd have Ken Palm and Synergy, Bart Torvik all, like pulled up, plus like the live stats feed for the game. And I think it was just like too much information kind of that I had. And so now what I try to do is like, basically like I try to watch as much film as I can. And then have those tendencies like in my head, like I'll write them down. Like I'll still put together like a Google Doc that I can always like refer back to. And I usually break that into, like if I'm scouting an opponent team, I'm going to split the doc into offense, defense. Then under offense, it's going to be what's the baseline offense. Okay, they're a spread pick and roll team. What do their spread pick and roll sets look like? Let's pick 5 of them. You know what I mean? And sort of like have those committed to memory. The pieces involved, how they get into it. I always try to make sure to mention like end of half or end of game offense. What is a team? It's just nice to have that for when, there's a baseline out of bounds play with 10 seconds left. Like, what do you think the team is going to run? And so it's good. So I like having sort of like the specialty situations for both of those. And the other thing, and I think this is just like natural, when I first started calling games, and it absolutely fit into the worldview of having like too much information. I would go through things too fast. Like I would be speed running. I would just want to I would talk too quickly. And now I've gotten much better at like slowing down. It sounds better slowly. You're less likely to sort of like trip on your own words and just sort of like let the information come to you, And then the other thing that is sort of like surprising, at least for me, it was like surprisingly hard, was like when you're the color analyst, like it's your job to do like the replays, you know what I mean? But it's sort of weird when like you've got the game going on right in front of you, you have a producer in your headset, and then also like there's a screen in front of you to show you, like, for you to basically have like 4 seconds to be like, what happened on this last possession, And with enough reps, it gets very natural. You get accustomed to it. But like initially, I was having to have like, the play-by-play person like point to the screen, and be like, talk, dude. So I've gotten more comfortable with that, which is good. And now I quite like doing the replay portion of things. It's kind of fun. But just like very lucky to like work with a lot of like great play-by-play people, sideline reporters, producers, and who have allowed me to sort of like be the nerd on these broadcasts. You know what I mean? Just sort of like rattle off plays, and ultimately, like when I'm doing that, I'm not trying to like hit like a bunch of like lingo during the games. You know what I mean? And say like, oh, this is you can say this is a zoom action, or this is a pin down screen, but you need to like describe it. You know what I mean? Like, don't say delay split 45. You know what I mean? Say like, well, they're running 5 out with a cut on the strong side, and then like you try to actually sort of like draw it out a little bit more. And then like there is, not to like totally get too inside baseball, but like there's a difference between like doing games on radio and doing games on like TV or streaming. The visual component of it changes things a lot. Like on a radio broadcast, the play-by-play person needs to be describing everything, right? Like they've got to be like, the Johnson brings the ball up across the timeline, like passes it to Smith, Smith passes it to Patterson and cuts that. Like, they need to be able to like talk a lot. So when you're the color analyst, like on a radio broadcast, you've got like basically the way I was taught was like you have time from like when the ball goes through the net until when it gets to half court to talk. And then you kind of need to shut up and let the play-by-play person like paint the picture of what's happening. There's a little bit more leeway when it's TV or streaming or whatever, but generally it's like still the same thing. It just is. You generally have like a little bit more room to breathe, which is fun. So it's awesome. I mean, it's really fun to sort of like watch, half a dozen games on a team and then actually call their game live, or watch half a dozen games on a team, then call a couple of their games. It just becomes this like kind of fun like pattern recognition, you know what I mean? And I think like I'm there to bring that stuff to the broadcast and to be the person who's like, when they run this play and Keza Jiffa, he's the point guard for High Point, when he is able to get down tilt to his left hand, like they score on this, X number, X, percentage of the possessions or whatever. And I get into the details with film and with stats, but I try to make sure that like it still is like applicable for the broadcast, that it's not too dense. It's not too caught up in lingo and trying to sound like smart. You're trying to like use those things to sort of like paint a picture of the game. So I'm still like, I'm still like trying to get better at it. Like I still have a ways to go, but it's really amazing. And like, I would be very excited to like get more opportunities to do it, down the line.
Yeah, it sounds like a super fun opportunity. I mean, I can definitely imagine that it might be a little overstimulating the first time you get in there, just all these different views. But like anything, you get some practice reps in, you kind of know where to hit the beats, and you kind of illustrated the differences between like old classic sports radio that's like painting the picture that has no visual to work with, but they got to use words to and phrases to kind of put the viewer there versus just kind of quickly hitting on it. And I can definitely also see how like you're almost talking in layman's terms, might not even realize anything that's going on. They're just, here to have a good time and enjoy some basketball. So like if you hit them with too many terms that only the real basketball like diehards know, they're just going to be lost. So you really got to kind of walk them through step by step. And there's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, that's why we've talked before in this podcast how basketball is a beautiful game where you can enjoy it with no understanding or being a complete master of it who's constantly learning. And that's what makes it such a fun sport. And, you've also said that you've gotten to hit Duke a few times and catch Cooper Flagg and the crew kind of up close and personal. So what's it like being in the building with, the Blue Devils this year?
Yeah, pretty cool. Like I've gotten to spend a lot of time around the Duke program. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. Durham is 20, 30 minutes away from my place here. I've been credentialed at Duke since 2016, 2017, something like that. So I've been going over there for a while now. I've gotten to see Jason Tatum, Zion Williamson, Wendell Carter Jr., RJ Barrett, Trey Jones, Paolo Banchero. Like I've been pretty fortunate, given where I am, like seeing Paolo up close was pretty amazing a couple of seasons ago too. But this year, like I'm not calling those games. I've only called one Duke game. It was the Syracuse Duke game in 2022, which was Duke destroyed them. But I'm credentialed there as a writer. The credentials at Cameron Indoor Stadium are amazing. You sit courtside, like you're right across from the benches. And it's a pretty amazing vantage point for those games. Like you're getting to see how much guys talk. And for me, that was like a huge thing when I got to see Derek Lively a couple of seasons ago, because he was like commanding as like the defensive anchor, calling out actions, constantly talking. And so that to me sort of like was sort of like stood out with him. It does stand out with Khaman Maluach, who I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about as well. But like he too is, quarterbacking that thing from quarterbacking Duke's defense from the back line and calling stuff out. Been very fun to see, all of those guys up close. Cooper Flagg has, I think, looked really impressive through the first couple of exhibition games and the first 3 regular season games. Kneuppel has obviously shot the ball very well. They brought in an excellent transfer class that has probably at least one, but my guess would be 2 NBA prospects in it. It was with Sion James and Malik Brown coming in from Tulane and Syracuse, respectively. So, like, the talent is incredible. And, I do think Duke's coaching staff runs, like, a pretty sophisticated operation there. I'm sure after the loss last night, and, like, their offense did sort of get, like, stuck in the mud down the stretch against Kentucky. And I think they probably went a little too heavy on, isolation type plays and clear outs and that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, like, they're pretty on the ball with, like, trying new things. And if you get the opportunity to talk to Duke's staff, they're going to talk about basketball in ways that would, like, really, like, jibe with you and I and probably a lot of the listeners of this too. Like, they're going to talk about the importance of rim pressure. They're going to talk about the need to create kick-out threes. They're going to talk about, the importance of a lob threat. They're going to in vertical spacing. They're going to talk about, like, they're willing to, like, talk about those things, which is always pretty cool. So seeing Duke play this season, it's been fun to see some of the new wrinkles that they've baked into the offense and how those are sort of like centering around Cooper Flagg at times. And then just getting to see these guys, 6 to 12 months before they're, headed to the NBA is pretty cool and definitely not something to be, like, taken for granted. Like, it was amazing getting to be around the Zion team, a couple seasons ago. It was amazing to get to see Paolo Banchero, develop at Duke a few years ago. Same with Jason Tatum. So it's I'm not sure if you spent much time in, like, the Tobacco Road, triangle portion of North Carolina, but, like, it is an area where college basketball, like, it's one of the few places where, like, people care more about college basketball here than they do about college football. Like, it just is something, like, it is part of the fabric of this area. And it sort of takes over, makes everyone, like, kind of crazy for a few months out of the year. But to get to be around Duke especially, but I've been able to, spend time around UNC and NC State over the years as well. And there have been some really, special players that I've gotten to see up close with those 2 programs too. So pretty lucky and sort of, like, excited just to get the season going because there's a ton of basketball to be played with what seems like a potentially pretty special team in Durham.
Yeah, I mean, what a run of talent you've got to see since those credentials. I mean, you got, at least 3 NBA franchise stars, like cornerstones, just sitting, let alone all these role players that have rolled through there. And I mean, I haven't made it up to that corner of Tobacco Road quite yet, but it sounds like a lovely place where people enjoy, college hoops. I mean, there's no crowd and nothing as exciting as much as college sports and how much communities just get into that, what they represent. It's almost like turf defending your area, your city, your representation, in the area around the country. And it just, people, whether it's football or basketball, people just go all out, just representing and showing off how much they care about their teams. And I was able to see Cooper Flagg a few times in person at Montverde, and
that's right.
Probably got down there 3 or 4 times to see him in person. And he just obviously jumps off the charts. Like, he's carrying over a lot of the skills that he showed there. Like, obviously the defensive instincts are the first thing you got to bring up, like his active hands, his long arms, his rim protection, his jumping passing lanes, kind of has the quick hands constantly moving for deflections and even grabbing boards with strength. But his offense brings a lot of versatility too. Like, I would, like, I don't want to overhype him. Like, there's been some talk about, like, some scoring and limits and maybe some creation limits. And, like, all I can say is, like, he's a tough shot maker. Like, to me, like, the comp is, like, if Kurlenko was hitting, like, midi pull-ups or something just this insane tough shot maker, because he has 3-point range. He can post you up and kind of spin with the drop step in the post and finish strong at the rim. He can turn around, hit a little fadeaway there. He's shown a couple like crossover midi pull-ups. You have a bunch of plays that we'll probably break down a little later here with the 5-out setups where like he can run a little 4-5 pick and roll, or he can finish strong at kind of as the roll man. And like, I don't necessarily think of him as like a one-man offense where he's creating looks for everyone with these amazing passes every single play, but like he can clearly make the right read and like score relatively consistently, and he's obviously filling up the stat sheet. Like to me, he's the runaway number 1 pick for this class. No one's it's just going to be really hard to challenge him for that status. And like he should be an impact player on both ends for a very long time. And obviously, came up a little short, I guess, last night in the Kentucky game, if you want to count the last few minutes against him compared to the first 35 or so. But like, he obviously did enough to help his team get to that point and was just nuclear the whole game. I mean, his stats were, 26 points, 12 boards, 2 blocks, 2 assists. Like, he clearly showed up. He did his thing. And like you said, the offense itself kind of bogged down a little bit. A lot of ISOs, not much movement, trying to ask him to self-create from the top of the key with nothing else is just kind of a lot to ask. It's not exactly his game, even if he's capable of doing it at times. And like, I want to say the play right before that, he like counter moved into a pull-up and one elbow jumper through 2 people through contact. It was like an insanely tough shot. So it's like, clearly he's got it in him, but maybe it's not every play, but we'll hit on Cooper's 5-out in a little bit here. But, I want to talk a little bit about some of these other prospects, some guys that you really think could have a chance to hit the NBA draft. Duke has one of the top classes, if not the top in the year this year. Kneuppel is running off screens. You had this great piece on how they're freeing his shooting gravity through stagger screens and getting him open, running up the gut in the middle, running around the side after maybe running a double drag. So maybe we'll hop into those plays here in a second. But what do you think? Let's start here. How many of these players do you think have a real chance of making the NBA between everyone on Duke's roster? I mean, you mentioned a few with the transfer. You said you got Cooper, Flagg's the obvious. Khaman and Kneuppel are kind of talked as like lottery level this year. And like, we haven't mentioned Tyrese, Proctor, Caleb Foster. You mentioned Sion, a couple in the transfer before as well. So, who really stands out to you? Because they all kind of bring some exciting skills to look at.
Yeah, I think, just for Cooper, I guess some other things I'd like to mention about seeing him up close. Like, I do think, like, he's a really high field player, too. Like, to go along with all of the physical tools, right? But just, like, his passing vision, especially when in the open floor, is really impressive. And I think even sort of against a set defense, like he's done actually a nice job sort of like making decisions as a passer when he gets to initiate some of these 5-out looks. They use him basically in every single like chartable way offensively. Like he's been used as a screener, he's been used in the post, he's been used as a ball handler in the pick and roll, spot up. They run back screen lobs for him. That's a play they run right out of the gate. I think 3 times now going into some of the exhibition games, and it happened again last night against Kentucky. So just thoroughly impressed with what I've seen from him up front. I kind of wanted to just touch base on that before circling around to some of the other guys. Like I think hands down Duke has 3 probably lottery picks, maybe even top 10 guys with Flagg, Kneuppel, and Khaman Maluach. And I mean, I think they missed, Maluach was cramping up during the second half of the game against Kentucky last night. I think they, pretty obviously missed his presence at the rim on both sides of the floor. And Malik Brown is an excellent backup center. But with Maluach, I mean, he's legit, 7'1", 7'2". He's super mobile, and he plays super hard, and he communicates. So he just has sort of like some of these like foundational components that you would want for like a defensive anchor, like the incredible size, a 9'8" standing reach, mobile, Loves to rebound, wants to get on the glass. He and Flagg are both incredible above the rim rebounders. Like really pretty amazing. I know Flagg got beat on at basically the last play of the game last night when he didn't box out on a missed free throw. But like those guys can really play above the rim and control the glass when they have it rolling. Duke does a really nice job targeting Maluach as a lob threat, and that's something that like they are constantly preaching, is using him as a pressure point on the rim. And to do that, they give him a lot of empty corner screens. He's often the one setting down screens for Kneuppel on some of these sort of like staggered looks. And then once he screens, he's rolling to the rim. So with Khaman, like he's getting a lot of his points just off of like really like sort of archetypal like run jump center ways, put back opportunities, screen roll, and he has incredible reach. Like he's able to some of the dunks he has, it's like it feels like his feet are just like basically back on the floor by the time he's able to throw it down. But you see him in warm-ups, like he's nimble. He doesn't move like a 17-year-old 7'2", prospect, right? Like he's much more like sort of like flexible and than you might think, and nimble. I think the thing for him, so I feel like he has like the run jump stuff down, and like he's gonna need to get stronger. He's gonna need to get better at smart contests, right? Playing with good verticality, not leaving his feet as much to try to block shots, and like trusting his length, his reaction time, and his timing. I think that got him into trouble on a possession late in the Kentucky game against Andrew Carr, where he bid on a little like isolation pump fake for an and one. But the tools are all there for him to be like a really impressive defensive center, and he wants it, which is like pretty amazing. To sort of like see him leaning into being just a defensive menace and a real presence for Duke. So the other stuff offensively, I mean, like he dabbles with the pick and pop or a catch and shoot three, even going back to pre-Duke, when he was playing with South Sudan this summer, or when he was in the BAL with the City Oilers. Like you can see him, like he has some sort of like, relocation, spot up 3-point shooting, but I feel like when he lets it fly from deep, you don't quite know where the ball's going kind of yet, but there's at least like somewhat of a willingness to try and take those looks, and Duke is like going to encourage him to get some of those up this season, which I think is good. I kind of thought coming into the year we might get to see Khaman like handle it like more in like the high post kind of as like a elbow handoff guy or a 5-out handoff guy, and given how Duke has sort of like restructured the spacing on its offense, like he's sort of like playing more on the wing, and Flagg is playing with the ball in the middle more, but they still occasionally throw it to him at the elbow, and like he has like I think a decent feel for sort of like getting into those handoff actions. He'll take occasionally, he'll look to hit a cutter on like a like a little like split cut or vertical cut. And then I know Kneuppel really struggled against Kentucky. To me, it felt like he struggled with like some of the length athleticism components. He had a 3-point shot blocked late in the game, but I also felt early on like he was just kind of and it's understandable, like it's a big game, but to me it just felt like he was like kind of playing like a little too fast. Like he was just like rushing to get into a shot. He was rushing to drive the ball, off the catch or in transition. So I think that to me was like an outlier bad game. My guess is that's going to probably be like the worst offensive game he has all season. And it should be noted, through the first 2 exhibition games and the first 2 games of the season before Kentucky, I mean, he was like on display as a really talented, movement, not just shooter, but like movement scorer. Cause like he's 6'7", 210 pounds. He's strong. Like he can play through the bump, like he can administer contact. He can absorb contact. He can move guys with that. He's got a little bit of a handle too. So like you can't just hard close out on him and know the possession's over. Like he'll curl and he can put the ball on the deck a few times. He can flow into pick and roll. Like he's a good passer. He and Flagg have nice, 2-man, I think chemistry when they're working together. and he knows to look for the fives on those empty side lobs when he curls the down screens. Like if he gets 2 on the ball, like if that screen defender steps up when he curls into the paint, he's looking for the lob. Like it's an automatic read. And with his size, he can pass, he's got a bunch of different passing windows he can get to. He can throw the ball over the top of guys. So excellent, screen usage. Nice job setting up defenders. Nice job reading his defenders, knowing when to fade those screens, when to curl. Like just like a pretty advanced sort of like off-ball mover. Last season, got to see Jared McCain up close at Duke, and he kind of came into Durham with that same kind of like off-ball feel. Like he just knew how to set guys up and play off of pin downs and flares. And Kneuppel feels like he's right there too. Really good rebounder. He gets on the offensive glass. He contributes on the defensive glass. My sort of like prior to last night, where again I thought pretty rough offensive shooting night, but like defensively, like I think vertically he's shown some like pop as an athlete, but laterally I think he's going to struggle in space. Like he struggles getting over screens. He'll get stuck on handoffs. Guys can beat him, one-on-one in space. So like he's going to have to find ways to get, quicker laterally, to get more flexible in the hips, to get smoother laterally. But offensively, like he's a pretty awesome prospect and who has good size and doesn't need the ball to like be a real weapon. But when he does have it in his hands, he can sort of like get, come online as a playmaker. So very impressed with him. So I don't know if you want to sort of like bounce back and forth off those guys, or we can maybe talk about some of the, sort of like lower tiered prospects for Duke, because there's a few other sort of like potential NBA players on this roster as well.
For sure. I mean, to hit on them real quick. Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything you just said. I mean, Khaman looked like a monster down there. I mean, natural defensive rim protection instincts, incredible hustle on the boards, like a traditional, like you said, kind of rim roll, rim protector. Mm-hmm. But that's what, has value as a two-way impact kind of guy, where you can project a role as a play finisher and a defensive anchor. I really liked how like he kind of would pick up his man, have one arm super high up and the other one on his defender, using that incredible standing reach you talked about with one arm, and able to slide his feet and kind of move with them for the majority of the game. And maybe, like you said, probably could get better about doing it the entire game, staying out of foul trouble and all that too. But, overall, really liked his instincts just as a, defensive anchor type. He just to note, he played on that South Sudan Olympic team that kind of made some noise this summer with Luol Deng, where I believe that team didn't have an indoor facility in the entire country 5 years ago. And then all of a sudden the story kind of became how they gave Team USA a run for their money in an exhibition game right down to the end. So that's a cool little background story. And yeah, I mean, versus Kentucky, he just showed off that strength around the rim, strong rim rolling, good positioning, and good lob threat. Really, really liked what I saw for him. And then same, like you said, with Kneuppel, he was able to find him on some lobs, he had a really nice, good field play where he kind of ran into some contact, fell to the floor. But as he was falling, he immediately shot the shuttle pass over to the big. Mm-hmm. I think it was Khaman for a strong finish. It was just a heads up play to get the easy bucket. He was intending to go there before he got hit, and he still made it happen before he fell to the floor. And yeah, maybe a little off game shooting wise, because otherwise he's just been a 3-point sniper, clearly bringing shooting gravity. And like you mentioned and written about, he can attack closeouts. He can dribble and drive through traffic. He can read a little bit to find the big man if he's drawing extra. And his chemistry is obviously immediate with Cooper Flagg. It almost reminds me of Liam McNeeley next to Cooper Flagg back at Montverde last year, where Flagg will be at the top of the key. He'll be working a little bit of a drive, maybe on the crossover. And if he doesn't see the drive, or if he sees that help defender drop in just enough, he'll immediately hit a chest pass kick out right to the shooting pocket of the shooter. And then it's up to the shooter to either pop it or attack that closeout in return. And that sequence kind of reminded me of those.
They're archetypes that work perfectly with one another, right? It's like the big wing initiator with Flagg in the off-ball mover type with Kneuppel. And you saw Duke trying to get them involved. It didn't really bear a ton of fruit, but you could see Duke last night trying to get them involved on empty side screens with Flagg screening for Kneuppel. And that's something they went to in one of the exhibition games, but they really haven't done it like all that much this season. But that does feel like that's going to be the like escape hatch play for Duke. Like, okay, the offense is stuck in the mud. All right, empty a side out, give it to Khan, and then have Cooper go screen for him. And like the last couple of seasons, that money play for them was Jeremy Roach and Kyle Filipowski with an empty side 2-man action. And like feels like that looks like that's Kneuppel and Flagg at the at the moment. And yeah, like having a guy like, the real reason why Kneuppel is like so enticing is because like he does look like a like gravity like bending movement shooter, right? Like teams are having to commit extra defenders to him. So like him running around is opening other stuff up. And that's sort of like what really makes him special, along with like the off dribble, off catch stuff that he provides as well.
Yeah, and off the top of my head, it almost reminds me as well as what the Raptors got going on with Scottie Barnes and Gradey Dick now. I was talking with Ez a little bit where Scottie's able to draw in extra defenders to the paint, and then Gradey Dick, just like Kneuppel, is more than just a standstill shooter. And the more I like kind of look into these upcoming shooting prospects, maybe there just aren't standstill shooters anymore. Maybe they're all working on these movement relocation.
I think they have to be.
Game,
I think they have to be, unless you're like a 5, like I think you really do need to be able to do a lot more with your shot. Like this is like the next iteration. I don't even think we're in like year 1 of this. I think we're in year like 3 or 4 of this now. Just like, it's not enough to be just a shooter. You've got to be able to like, and not just enough to be a shooter and a good defender. It's like, what can you also do off the ball, or like how advanced is that shooting? And yeah, like, the guys we're talking about here, Kneuppel and McNeeley, those are probably the 2 best, movers for this 2025 draft class in terms of like off ball guys. We'll see where things end up. We got a lot mentioning Scottie Barnes. We got a lot of Montverde discussion here. That's what we touched on. RJ Barrett, didn't mention Tariq Whitehead, but there's been a fair amount of Montverde connections to Duke in recent years. But and then Sion James is a guy, like, I don't know if you saw him, how much you saw him play at Tulane. He's a guy that could have gone to the draft in 2023, in 2024. But I think he's absolutely like a pro player. And I think a really like savvy draft conscious front office is going to like find their ways into getting this guy. And he's going to, and just whatever franchises you can think of that like prioritize like high field strength, on the wing. James can basically play the 1 through 4 in Duke's system. He's functioning a lot as their sort of like de facto backup point guard. But at times he'll back up Flagg at the 4 spot and get to initiate 5 out from that sort of like front court playmaker role. He is incredibly strong. Like I would say, as far as the guys I've gotten to see at Duke over the years, just like who has the most sort of like NBA ready body, it was like, Paolo probably, let's be real, but like AJ Griffin and Sion James, just in terms of like muscle, like it's just kind of ridiculous. He's incredibly strong. Laterally, he can really move and heat things up at the point of attack. I thought his injury last night was actually a huge blow for Duke in the Kentucky game. They really missed him. And then, like, he just does a lot of stuff offensively. Like, he's a great source of live ball rim pressure, but he can spot up playoff ball. Just, like, totally, like, very, like, scalable, malleable player that you can, kind of, like, clip and paste into a bunch of different spots. Malik Brown, the transfer front court, a guy from Syracuse, like one of the most, like, he's like, he's probably a little undersized, 6'8", 6'9", for a guy that doesn't really shoot all that much, but like very high field player, excellent short roll passer. He can facilitate from the elbows, and defensively he's special. He can switch out and guard, pretty much any position in college. He may have some of the fastest hands I've seen, like, up close, and it's really fun. Like, keep an eye on this when you get to watch Duke play this season. When Brown's in the game, and if they're playing a team that's trying to like initiate 5 out offense, with their center in the middle, Brown's so disruptive at the point of attack. It's weird. It's weird seeing a like center defender that you think of as sort of like heating things up in that region of the floor, but he's so mobile. His hands are so quick. He can really be bothersome. So I kind of thought he would have actually had like a little bit more of an impact in the Kentucky game, just given how much UK is trying to run 5 out. I kind of thought that maybe he could have really like had like a big defensive role in that game, but Brown's special. And then Tyrese Proctor, I mean, he's a guy that in the 2023 offseason, between his freshman and sophomore year, it felt like the expectations for him like got like a little out of whack. Like he's a really nice player. I like Proctor a lot. He had a good freshman season, and he closed it playing very well for Duke as they won the ACC and then made the NCAA tournament. He had a big game against Tennessee when they lost. He was doing a lot of it off of like tough shot making. And he's not a real rim pressure guy. Like he's not super physical to like play through the bump and create space. He's not a guy that can like reliably turn the corner. Like he can definitely like set guys up and make plays off the ball. Like he's got great vision. He can hit skip passes. He's like a very heady guard that has that maps the floor, I think, like very well, and can throw like a lot of different passes. And he's 6'5", so he can see a lot of. You can scan over the top and see stuff. But I kind of like him when he gets to play more in the role that he has now, which is sort of like off-ball guard, connector. He's an excellent transition, hit-ahead passer. And I think he's like better suited for that role in part because it lets him like move around and spot up. He's an excellent catch and shoot guy as well. So like, I think the expectations for him got out of whack in 2023, in part because he had that great close to the season. And then Jonathan Givony for ESPN mocked him, top 7 or 8. Mm-hmm. And it just sent everyone into a tailspin thinking this guy was going to come back and be like the best guard, best guard creator, one of the best guard creators in college basketball. Like he's a really, really awesome player. I think the issues with Proctor, I mean, he has some limitations to his game, but I think it really was like a battle of perception more so than anything else. Like people thought it and expected him to average 20 points a game and be this like high usage, amazing, play creator, shot creator. And like, he's sort of better where he gets to like do some of that, but also float around and like help get the transition game going and just like doing lots of different little things as opposed to like filling up the box, the stat sheet with incredible offensive creation. So like, I put like a lot of blame at people just sort of like, again, when I saw that mock from Givony, it made my head spin a little bit because like I'm very bullish on Proctor, but then when I saw someone grade him out as a top 10 pick, I was like, wait a second, guys. Like, whoa, let's tap the brakes here a little bit. But he's a third-year player, but he classed up, so he's basically a sophomore age. And I think he's had a nice start to the season, but he still needs to sort of like, I think, figure out what his role is next to Cooper Flagg and Caleb Foster and Sion James. And there's a lot of guys that are in Kneuppel, but I think Proctor is like, again, very high field player and someone who like really like reads and thinks the game and processes it at like a pretty elite level. So that's what you're banking on with him, I think, ultimately. And like, maybe that's not enough to get anyone excited for him as a prospect, as someone that like does a lot of things pretty well, but nothing maybe great. But ultimately, I think he's a guy that like has the chance to eventually crack a roster in the NBA because of the shooting and because of the passing.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely even stood out last night against Kentucky was just that smooth pull-up shot. Like he was able to draw some switches, hit some step backs, hit some pull-ups, tight handle. And you mentioned just kind of like a smart connector where he's going to grab and go. He's going to look up the floor. He's going to keep the ball moving. He, can kind of create a little space with the body and the ball control. But like you said, sometimes when guys get overhyped, expectations and perception becomes reality and maybe it can be unfair for certain guys. So, hope to see him get a fair shot. And yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's so crowded with talent on this roster. It can be hard to find an actual pecking order of real roles until they kind of figure themselves out as the season goes. And Yeah, I mean, Foster showed some good body and ball control too last night. Good feel as a decision maker. And I thought Sion James' explosiveness is what really popped out for me.
Yeah.
Like he just high flying attacks and transition, really smart at attacking the gaps well off the ball. Like just clearly that, like you mentioned, just that natural athleticism, the strength, the hops. Like he clearly has like that kind of like NBA body type that could probably get to the next level if everything else rounds out. So we might hop into some of your plays here for what Duke has done this year. Like looking at, all right, so some 5 out here. Mm-hmm. We got, as you wrote about in your Substack, that they have been running some 5 out, even going back to like last season with Filipowski, I believe, as well. But, a lot of Cooper Flagg kind of initiating at the top and some different stagger looks to get Kneuppel open and Khaman kind of, the 5 out here has the 5-man either normally at the top, but Duke has been putting him on kind of the left wing. And you kind of explain how this kind of brings the big man to the elbow. It's not his normal help defense spot. He's not back in the paint on the block, able to kind of sink in and leave his man in the corner. Mm-hmm. He's forced to rotate on the wing. It's not what they normally would like to do. So this first clip is just a 5 out into a baseline stagger for Kneuppel with Khaman on the wing. So what do you see here? And also, what kind of makes you want to break down a play? What are you looking for to be like, oh, that's interesting. I need to really get nitty gritty on this one.
Yeah, well, before you roll it, just like know that Kneuppel is spaced to the far wing, the far corner. He's in the right corner. Maluach is on the left wing, like near side. You've got, I believe that's Proctor in the right corner. And I think it's either James or Foster that's going to center the ball to Flagg in the middle of the court. And yeah, Duke ran a lot of 5 out with Kyle Filipowski in that middle role last season, but they've changed things up. They've got Cooper Flagg, who's essentially their 4. He's the one in the middle, and they're spacing Maluach to the wing. This is something like this spacing technique is something we saw in the NBA last season. I know the Twitter account Bowser to Bowser, he's talked about this some. JJ Redick and Tyrese Halliburton talked about it on Redick's podcast last season, but like the Hawks with Quinn Snyder, the Celtics with Joe Mazzulla last season did this. The Charlotte Hornets now with Charles Lee are doing a lot of this, and it's trickling down to college basketball. But basically, you can use that center. I asked John Shire about it after the first exhibition game. He said the plan is to use that guy to open up driving lanes. That's why they have them spaced out. It allows them to also get a running start to crash for offensive rebounds if they want to do it. It changes the help responsibilities for the opposing center. And then one of the other things Shire said was they want to be able to get into movement sets off of it using that screener. So when you've got the opposing center sagged down into the paint or into the lane or whatever, you can run, a guy like Kneuppel off of a screen from that. He might be coming into space. So go ahead and roll it here if you can. So yeah, Proctor sets that first screen. Then the staggered look comes for Kneuppel with Maluach setting the second screen. You can see the defender from Army. He tries to shoot the gap. He tries to go over the second screen. And that's just an easy pass for Flagg, right? I mean, Knippel's going to fade that screen. Flagg's got time to deliver it. And then, again, Kneuppel perfectly shot ready, sets his defender up well, reads the screen well. But this is just good action that they've run for Kneuppel a few times this season where they go 5 out and then they get him into some staggered looks. Yeah, so obviously he's covering a ton of ground going from, the right corner to the left wing. But this is this kind of stuff is right in his wheelhouse, and it's what makes him, such an awesome prospect. I think it also speaks to, sort of Maluach really wanting to be involved as a screener offensively. That's something he's trying to do well at. We were literally just talking about Proctor just being a guy that willingly does lots of good stuff for you offensively. Well, here he is, helping free a teammate up. As it's not showing up anywhere in the box score, but he's helping generate a 3 there. As far as plays that I'm looking for, it's interesting because there's to some extent it's just when you see it, it kind of just if you do this enough, you just have an idea for what interests you or or what you think might be interesting, like more broadly. I will say, like, I'm a sucker for sort of like really like detailed like off-ball movement stuff. Like that does. I mean, I think if you're sort of like if you're a nerd about the X and O's, like those are things that just like they're just gonna be like red meat for you, kind of, because you get to be like, oh, look at all this cool screening action. Here's what they're trying to do, and here's how they executed it. I have been really like harping a lot on these like 5-out plays this season when the center is spaced to the wing, though. In part because I think it's a pretty cool trend that you're seeing now in basketball. Two of the teams that I cover most seriously, the Hornets and Duke, both happen to be mixing it in this year. So it's just sort of like front of brain for me. And it's cool seeing, Flagg be or I guess actually, pardon me, that's not Flagg. That's Mason Gillis that's operating it. But Gillis is one of the backup forwards on the roster, so forgive me. It's not Cooper Flagg, but often this is Flagg initiating that stuff. And so it's cool to get to see him. You kind of feel for me, it feels like sort of like looking into the future for him, I guess, with Flagg. It's like getting to see him like initiate in some of these like spread 5-out looks. Sort of like, again, kind of like peering, 2-3 years down the road for him. So for me, again, I'm a sucker for like the detailed off-ball actions, but I just like I like recognizing patterns with stuff, and I like finding team offenses that like figure out ways to like use their guys and to like integrate them to like make it cohesive and work. And that to me strikes as that. Like it's part system, but you see the individual skill of all of those guys inside that play too.
Right. And what I think is super cool about the 5-out schemes that you've written about and clipped up a lot as well is just kind of how many sets they have out of just that one scheme. And Dan Hurley talked about it too, like kind of comparing it to football. Like you have a formation and then maybe you have 8, 9, 10 different looks that you want to run out of that formation. So it's not obvious that a little halfback screen is coming, that you can just keep countering on countering on countering.
It's sequencing too. It's like you show the same look 3 times, but on the 4th time you go to a different progression out of it, or you fake something out of it. And that's like really, to me, that's like the essence of like half court offense, outside of just the general like need to create advantage and get 2 on the ball and play out of it, right? But like to me, that really is the essence of it. This is another 5-out set. We've got Cooper in the middle of the floor operating with the ball. You got 2 guys in the corners, 2 guys on the wings. Once again, the guy in the wing to the left of Cooper Flagg, that's Malik Brown, the Duke's backup center. And this is a play that they ran for Kyle Filipowski a lot last season. It's a 5-out look designed to throw the ball back into the post for the player who is initiating the action. It's something that John Beilein in Michigan used to do a lot when he was coaching at Ann Arbor. So Flagg is going to like look left. He's going to throw the ball back to his right. I think Kneuppel is going to lift up from the corner, if I'm not mistaken. And then I think it's Caleb Foster is going to set that little like rip back screen to roll Flagg down into the post.
Let's click play here and find out.
Yeah. So you go, fake the screen. He lifts up. There's the back screen. Then Cooper gets a post touch. He misses the shot, but it's a good look. And I think the next, he's going to roll right into, here's the same play last season at Virginia Tech. Filipowski looks left, throws back right. Foster sets that rip screen. McCain throws. I mean, it's the same. It's literally the same guys, right? But like Filipowski is in place of Cooper Flagg, and Jared McCain is in place of Con Kneuppel. But it's the same play, that 5-out look to try to like invert the offense and then slice or back screen your 4 or 5 to the block. Filipowski gets like a cut finish off this, and whereas like because the timing's so good, whereas Cooper's sort of like more or less catching it in isolation in the post. But it's still good action. And again, it's the pattern recognition stuff like this is like really like satisfying to see.
Right, and off what we were saying with the sets, I mean, they could run a simple 4-5 pick and roll off of it, and then they flow into ghosting that screen, and the center runs across, and he just keeps it on the drive, or maybe he runs a little flare screen, and then obviously you break down all the Beilein actions and whatnot here, and there's another kind of a spin-off of just off of
Yep.
the Beilein one, where this time they run a pin down for Kneuppel.
Yep. Yeah, you're gonna see the same thing. Like you would think that they're going to it's this time. It's now Kneuppel starting the possession in the middle of the floor, right?
Right.
So like he's in place of Cooper Flagg or Kyle Filipowski. It's that same look. He looks left with the center Malik Brown on that left wing. He looks left, then he spins back. He spins back right. He comes off of the the little like rip screen that rolls him to the block. But then you're going to get the quick rescreen action. So again, Proctor sets the back screen, then Sion James sets the down screen, and then really nice off-ball read by Kneuppel, good pass by Proctor as well to fit it in there. But yeah, it's good use of spacing. It's a good way. It's a good use of Kneuppel as an off-ball mover, using your guards as screeners. So yeah, I just really like, again, to me, this gets back to the sort of like sequencing thing we were just talking about. Like you show teams how this is a way for you to get the ball into the post. Well, okay, now we're going to like fake it to the post and get, the best shooter in the gym, running off of another screen basically. So, again, speaks to Kneuppel as an off-ball mover. It speaks to sort of the functionality and reads of Duke's offense. But yeah, it's just very, very cool to see, again, sort of like all the modern complements of, center space to the wing, 5-out look, screening actions to get a shooter, a quick catch and shoot. And again, just the versatility of some of Duke's better players to fit into different spots is rather impressive.
Right, and then when Kneuppel's shooting gravity kind of brings that extra defender out to him, he has that feel, like you mentioned, to hit the roller real quick when he draws two, to hit him on the cut or off ball towards the rim too. So
it's an automatic. It's an automatic for Duke. Like especially when Maluach is in there, it's just throw it to the rim. Something's going to happen. Kind of. It's like even if they don't get the lob dunk, they're getting a foul. This is like throwing a fade route to a 7-foot receiver. Like you're either going to get the touchdown or get the pass interference, and like that sort of feels like that's what Duke's going for with those lobs for Maluach.
Yeah, when in doubt, hit the 9'8" standing reach or whatever.
It's not a bad. It's a different. And like Duke didn't have that last season, right? I mean, like Kyle Filipowski was an awesome player, and I think had some nice moments for the Jazz so far this season. But he was not like a vertical. He's not. Maluach plays like lively and Mark Williams with his ability to like roll hard and catch, and obviously like Filipowski could do stuff that those other guys can with his ability to. Face up and make plays on the Lively was a pretty good short roll passer too, but his sort of like space playmaking was pretty special for a 7-footer. But yeah, was not the sort of like lob threat that obviously that Khaman is.
For sure, and I mean, there's just so many different ways to work with 5-out spacing, and I mean that's where the modern game is headed. So I mean, it's obvious that that more and more plays will come out of that action, and it's cool to see kind of different variations of it, between the 4.5 out that Pauser Bowser termed. I think he's been shouted out on at least half of these podcasts by now for his terminology.
It's five the action, I believe, is how he was. That's actually now like when I clip all these plays and like I'll usually label this like I would label that like delay, beeline, pin down or something like that. But then I'll include like 5 slot at the end of it, just so when I want to go back through my plays and like know the ones that I have that have the 5 space to the wing or the slot area, they're all bunched up there for me. And again, the Hornets have been using it a ton, and Duke's been using it a lot so far this season. So I've just become like well versed with it, before we even got to the middle of November here.
Right, yeah, and great transition because we're going to hit the 5 slot here soon for the Hornets. And talking about Charlotte, I mean, LaMelo Ball just absolutely is back. Like his resurgence is in full, especially on offense. I mean, 30 points a game, 6 assists, 5 rebounds, 1.5 steals. He's making 5 threes a game. He's shooting 13 of them. He's shooting 10 twos, 59% true shooting. He's ranked 12th in offensive EPM, which has him 26th overall, and just absolutely lights out. I mean, he was in last night's Magic-Hornets game, like he was having an absolute like 3-point shootout, playing horse with Jalen Suggs. I want to say they both hit their first 2 threes. LaMelo hit like a one-legged pull-up falling away. Suggs hit a fadeaway corner 3, a logo 3, forcing a timeout on the other side. LaMelo ends up with 35 points, 7 assists, 6 boards, 62% true shooting. Just wild. Suggs ends up about 17 points, 4 assists, 4 boards, 2 steals, 1 block, 61% true shooting. And then Franz Wagner. I mean, he just getting to the rim at will, drops in 32 of his own with 8 boards, 5 assists, 3 steals, 61% true shooting. I mean, Franz getting to the cup, dropping slams, dropping hammers, breakaway dunks. He had a nice steal and slam sequence, and obviously doing his Euro step driving thing through the paint. One big difference in this one was the Hornets kind of being a little sloppy with it. They had 4 offensive fouls against themselves in the first half. They committed 22 turnovers to the Magic 11, which led to the Magic having twice as many fast break points, 17-8. I was at the game. It was actually pretty close for a little while until about, I want to say, late in the third quarter, kind of just took off. It got to about 25, 30 points almost the rest of the way. But man, it's always exciting seeing LaMelo in person. And so like, what's it like been covering him this year? And like, what do you make of both him and then, Brandon Miller kind of having a little bit of a breakout, launching a bunch of threes, hitting some tough shots. He's hit like a crazy, I remember one sequence, he like lost the ball, got it back, looked up at the rim, a few steps in front of half court and just swished it. He had like a sweet like tip in at the buzzer game winner the other night after a strong performance. And then, Trey Mann too, kind of breaking out a little bit. So what's it been like watching the Hornets this year?
Yeah, they've been, obviously they're not a great team and they're dealing with a ton of injuries right now. The front court's pretty banged up, both basically their top 2 centers, Mark Williams, he hasn't played since November last season, dealing with a back injury, and now, I guess like an ankle or foot injury. Richards is suffering, either I think it's a labrum, like a torn labrum or a shoulder injury. So I mean, their center rotation is down to Taj Gibson,
the immortal Taj Gibson, still starting.
Yeah, it's crazy. Moussa Diabate, who I think is I like him as a defender. He's like a really good energy hustle play guy. And defensively, he can actually do a lot of stuff. But he's a two-way center, and then he's now being asked to do a ton for them. And then Grant Williams, who's he can definitely play some center, and he did for the Hornets last season. But he's 6'5" and doesn't score in the paint. It's just a pretty limited mix. They didn't have Trey Mann last night against Orlando. And Mann is really important for them on the basketball, the creativity, the rim pressure, they're just very reliant on the special shot making and playmaking, particularly of LaMelo, but also Brandon Miller and to a lesser extent Trey Mann too. I mean, that's really what this offense is based around, is space the floor and then try to find ways to free those guys up. And LaMelo is just the shot making is totally ridiculous. I mean, I think he was heading into the Orlando game, he was above, I think he was hovering around 41% in pull-up threes. And he's hitting them all kinds of ways. Step backs, pull-ups. If you give him drop coverage, the shot's going up. If you switch out, he's going to try to, get to his bag a little bit. And often he's looking for the step back three. He's attempting over 19 threes per 100 possessions, which is crazy and leads the league right now, according to Basketball Reference. But also, I think he's shown a willingness to also to slash and get downhill some. Maybe not quite as much as easily as he was last season before the injury, just from a numbers perspective. But I think, free throw rate aside or whatever, I think he is showing a nice willingness to kind of slash and get downhill and get to the paint. And occasionally he's finishing through the bump. So, I think his growth has come in a lot of ways. It's not just, the three-point shot making, the one-legged pull-ups, all the crazy – he's just doing stuff that no one else is really doing right now in terms of, how some of these shots are going up. He hit one of the shots he hit to force overtime against the Sixers on Sunday. was like a scramble play, sideline out of bounds. He sprinted the corner, took like one dribble like away from the basket and like shot it fading out of bounds with like no angle. And I mean,
that's crazy.
Swish. Yeah. It's just ridiculous stuff. I think the pick and roll playmaking has looked good and been there. I think the hit aheads in transition have been good. I think his like, when he's able to get off the ball when he's playing next to Mann or Miller, and I think his sort of like catch and go game is good. Like obviously he's trying to like relocate and look for spot up threes or sprinting into handoffs for threes, but like he'll catch and go and get downhill or like catch and go and kick back out, keep the advantage chain going. I think he and Miller have nice chemistry when they're asked to do that. The main thing for him is just like, I mean, for really, it's like defensively he gets picked on. There's been probably, I would say like a handful, half dozen games. I mean, there are only 11 games in the season where like there's just a target on his back. You know what I mean? And they're just gonna, if it's Jimmy Butler or if it's someone else, like they're gonna try to get a switch with LaMelo and go against him. That's just gonna be part of the picture, and Charlotte's gonna have to like problem solve around that. He's got good length, and I think LaMelo is like an off-ball team defender with his anticipation and his feel. He can do some cool stuff, but like he really struggles going up against like super shifty or super strong, either like speed guards or like big wing creators. And so that is something to work around. And then the other thing is just his health. Like you got to knock on all the wood, man. I mean, he's wearing ankle braces this season, finally, after all these injuries. But he's played so little basketball since his all-star season, when he was 20 years old. And he's played very few games the last 2 years coming into this one. So for me, it's just like keeping that guy can you keep him on the floor for 65, 70 games this season, right? Because if you do, he's going to put up bonkers video game numbers. He's going to probably get an all-star bid. I mean, maybe that's a little overeager just given the finite number of slots for that. But like he is that kind of like, once you get to the group that's like below like Jokic and Doncic and like, like sort of just like offensive skill, like those guys are obviously just like on another planet. But like in that next group, like he's kind of with everyone else, like, with anyone else this season. He's been amazing. So he's a joy to watch. The dude is an absolute treasure. And just real quickly on Miller, like Miller was probably my favorite guy to watch in the league last season. He had an excellent rookie year, gravity bending movement shooter. They run lots of cool stuff to get him coming off screens. Super malleable, super scalable player, really good off-ball player, like sets ghost screens. They scored on a bunch of like pick and pops with LaMelo this season when they have him screen for LaMelo. But with that size and his shooting touch, just a pretty special catch and shoot guy, especially off movement. Can really score in the pick and roll in the mid range. For him though, it's just going to ultimately be like as good as he is already. I think right now you can feel confident that he's a guy that can make a couple of all-star teams or something like that at some point in his career. But like he's not a rim pressure guy. He's not someone that like can really just like bulldoze and like knock people over with contact. Like he struggles with contact. He gets knocked off his platform. He'll be forced to pick up his dribble and pass the ball back out. So he really is like very reliant on his length and like getting into gaps and seams to like finish at the rim. Like he's got to be kind of creative, but everything else offensively is like pretty awesome. Like he's a great passer, excellent shooter. And there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with him. So his development's it'll be very interesting to see like between now and the next 2-3 years, like where he goes as like a pick and roll guy. Can he get stronger? Can he score, more in the paint? Can he get to the line more? Because like the pull up shooting in the mid range, the movement shooting from deep is pretty ridiculous. So like there's a lot to like, but I don't know. I'd be curious to know how you feel about like, in your mind, do you see Miller as like an awesome number 2, or is he a guy that you think is more comfortable sliding in as like a number 3 option? I guess it should count as on a team that's like trying to contend, actually, right? Not like what the Hornets are doing right now, which is like putting a good product on the court, but ultimately like as a team that's not going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, like maybe for now, more of kind of a secondary option while he kind of still grows into his NBA form. Like I like to think that the prime is more like late 20s, early 30s for guys. So like he's still really early, and he's clearly showed some insane tough shot making, like you've said, and can also kind of hit the catch and shoot. Like I've really enjoyed his chemistry with LaMelo this year because I was a little worried it might be like a little my turn, your turn type of situation. But they seem to seamlessly play off of each other, look for each other. You mentioned the pick and pops. That's what I really like there. So, like, you would hope, like, even, I'm sure the comp to Paul George gets thrown out for a lot of players that are tough shot making big wings. But, like, maybe it can scale depending on the talent around them, where, like, some nights he could be your best player, your leading scorer, and some nights he's your third best player, where he's hitting the catch and shoots and kind of playing off of others and has no problem doing that. So, hopefully he gets to that level of versatility where, like you said, like it can also drive and attack through contact and finish downhill, finish going through the paint a little more often because the tough shot making is there. So I imagine a couple years being in the NBA, putting on some more muscle, some of that will come because he can already create such and convert such tough shots already. And yeah, I mean, LaMelo is just one of one. Like, I don't know who to compare him to other than Steph in terms of like the excitement of the game. Like, you just don't know what this guy's gonna do any given moment. He brings that effective flair where like it's not just showing off. It's normally a move that might only be capable if he does try going through his own legs and then spinning and throw a behind the back pass where like no one else is thinking of it. No one else can do it, but like sometimes he does. And it probably might anger some of the more traditional coaches that want to see certain things done a certain way. But man, I mean, he's just beyond exciting.
The thing is, he's not really like that high of a turnover player, despite and part of that is because he takes a lot of like off dribble shots or whatever too. And that can like deflate turnover numbers to an extent, I feel like. But like for this guy's career, he just like every year is at 15% turnover rate. It's actually one of the things that like, I mean, I'd be curious, like, I don't know how you experienced this, but like it felt like the league got really down on him the last couple of years. And it's tough because like he was so hurt. Wasn't playing. And Charlotte was in just like, I mean, they were in such a terrible spot. I mean, the talent wasn't there. He wasn't the only guy injured. Like the last days of the Michael Jordan ownership were some of like the like darkest days, and what's not exactly been like the rosiest, franchise arc in Charlotte. And like, it was sort of tough to see like a lot of guys that were I very much am a big fan of Tyrese Halliburton, but like as his star took off, and he's a media darling too, you know what I mean? And I don't even mean to like single him out, but it was sort of like people were just like, oh, LaMelo's been passed. Like he's just been passed by all these guys. And it was like, he's hurt and he's in an absolute dumpster fire of a situation. And so like, it's not worth getting into like the expanded universe of the Hornets, but like, new ownership, new front office, new coaching staff. Boom. Like it's just, again, they're not going to be good this year. And that's totally okay, in part because they owe a lottery protected 2025 first round pick to the Spurs. So like they should be trying to keep that, honestly. But like, and ultimately the thought should be like, well, how can you build it up around LaMelo going forward? You've got Brandon Miller. Maybe you could get a top whatever pick in what looks like a pretty loaded 2025 draft class. You've got extra picks coming in down the line because of the Terry Rozier trade to Miami, because of the PJ Washington trade to Dallas. So like you have future first round picks coming in. To John Salon, I think he's been, he looks a little out of place. It's like a 19-year-old rookie that's being forced into playing more because of the Miles Bridges injury. But like, yeah, he looks like an interesting prospect to have, long term. So I think the big thing that I would love to be able to see LaMelo have at some point this season is Mark Williams back and healthy. Because, like, it's such a bummer how little of this guy's career he's gotten to play with like incredible lob threat at center. Like we're in year 5 with him. And like most of his centers at the start of his career, I mean, like I'm a huge Cody Zeller fan, but it was like Cody Zeller, Bismack Biyombo. It's been a lot of like Nick Richards. Like it's just like guys that and Richards is like a totally like serviceable like rotation NBA center, but like not the guy like Mark Williams that with 9'9" standing reach that can be a vertical threat. And like what LaMelo would look like with someone like that. Last season, LaMelo, Brandon Miller, and Mark Williams. So like that's the core 3 right now for this team. Those guys played like 160 minutes together last season total. They played 0 all 3 together this year because Mark hasn't played. So for me, it's like, can you imagine what this guy would look like if you surrounded him with shooting, which you've got Miller there now. If you gave him another, secondary creator, you got Miller and Trey Mann and I guess Bridges or whatever. And then if you also gave him like a lob, like a real like legit lob catcher that he could play with in the pick and roll. And so just keep your fingers crossed that Williams can be healthy enough to play at some point this year because I want to see it.
Yeah, he needs his Clint Capella, the pick and roll man, that vertical gravity lob threat that, Trae Young has gotten to kind of have that automatic offense with in the half court for years and Harden before him. But exactly, I mean, I definitely noticed kind of the stock around the league go down to the point where I want the Magic to just trade for him if they could pull it off, because like the one thing this team needs is like a pull-up 3-point shooter that can set up these guys. So like, come on down anytime he's available.
Also, Orlando could just like hide him defensively as well as like, like if we're doing, fantasy basketball, he's like a slammed. I mean, he and Paolo would be, you could play them off one another too. He's actually like, he's one of those guys, if you watch LaMelo more, he's a good off-ball player. Like historically, he's been a good spot-up 3-point shooter. He can come off screens and handoffs and shoot. He's like a good connective passer when you get him into those like, scrambled advantage situations. So I think it's hard to argue for him to be something that isn't a primary guy when he's scoring 30 points per game and taking a million shots. But like, I think there's a really easy way to like scale him down, honestly. Like it's cool that he's getting to like explore this quasi Helio space, but really like the ideal version of him is just like this, but just like it's maybe not as fun version of him, but like the best winning basketball version of him is probably like scaled down, a little bit. But I just think ultimately like part of the sort of like stock down league wide on him, like, I just thought like you'd hear people talk about him and just criticize the passing and the turnovers. And it was like, he's not a high turnover player. Like he really isn't. Like his poor decision-making, in my opinion, comes in sometimes with the shot selection. So I think some of the pull-up threes, it's like, all right, man, like maybe not on a 3-on-1 in transition where you had, Brandon Miller running late, maybe not that one, but for the most part, like he does a decent job taking care of the ball. It just felt like kind of sloppy analysis for a guy that like, yes, there's plenty to critique him on defensively and plenty to critique him on offensively. But I just felt like some of it was a little like misguided in terms of like evaluating him.
For sure. I mean, he clearly has been hurt, like you've said. Like that's the biggest thing with his production and everything is just like, can he stay healthy for the whole season, and let's see what he actually gives for a full sample, because like, I mean, he had that one year where I want to say they made the playoffs as kind of a late seed, and he was the lead guy there. And I actually think of him as kind of like obviously better version than his brother, but like a similar thriving as an off-ball connector. Like I love his handoff relocation skills. Like he's constantly, if he's not open and doesn't, take a really tough shot, he is constantly dumping it off and running around for a rescreen and relocating around off the ball for handoffs and beyond the arc, like looking to just keep the flow of the action going. Like I love that about his, like he just never stops, especially that motor kind of just constantly relocating, looking for another shot. And yeah, I mean, exactly in terms of like the decision making is more so questionable on the shot making, but like he's the one guy that can kind of hit some of those shots. So it's that constant balance of like trying to not do it on a 3-on-1, but maybe more so when the shot clock is late and there's no other options. Like, yeah, force up whatever you can think you can make. So, it's a little unfair. It's probably a little bit, what have you done for me lately, kind of going around the league as the, a lot of media tends to do, and kind of has quick memory to forget things. And, now Halliburton's having a little bit of a down year while LaMelo's real high up there. Yeah. So you could see that.
This stuff ebbs and flows. It ebbs and flows. And I know that doesn't always jibe with like, a 24-hour, 365 content, cycle.
Yeah. Right. Shooting.
Both those guys are awesome. Those guys are awesome, and like, I just want it to be, one of the things I didn't ever want to like, dean Tyrese because he's amazing, but I wanted it to be like, people think that like there's an ocean between these two guys in terms of like, skill or whatever. And like, I think they're actually like bunched up,
even Trae Young like put up 30 and 10 and didn't make the All-Star team just last year. I mean, like, obviously the amount of skill in the league right now, it shows how much talent there can be for someone to put up those numbers, lead the league in like points and assists, I believe, and not make the All-Star team. So like, that's one thing, but like, LaMelo's clearly in this tier of like, maybe not a clear superstar, like you said, of Luka or I almost did it, Jokic, but clearly, like, as playing as well as any guard in the league this season. I mean, there's no question about it. Like, he is out here scoring assassin. I want to say he's up there in scoring and pull-up shooting, among everything else.
He was above. He was, again, heading into the Orlando game, he was around like 41% on off dribble threes, on obviously like insane volume. And honestly, the catch and shoot three numbers have been down a little bit this season. So, it's like at some point, both those numbers are probably going to like, regress to the mean a little bit. But ultimately, he's still going to take a ton of threes and make a lot of them. And that pull-up three-point shooting for him is huge. To me, that was always like the thing he kind of had to add. If we had this conversation in 2021 or 2022, this is what I would have said, because like he needed that kind of pull-up gravity to be the thing that helped him like unlock pick and roll coverage at the top. Like he needed to be able to like geek out defenses a little bit. That way it helps him actually like turn the corner more. It's a guy that's not just like, I mean, he's obviously very fast and quick, but it's not, Tyrese Maxey, he's not a bulldozer like Kawhi. So like he needs to be able to like leverage the shot to be able to like get into his drive game, which then opens up some of the other playmaking stuff for him too.
Absolutely. And you mentioned his pick and roll. I think he's like 1.5 points on synergy in the 80th percentile around there, running pick and rolls now. And that's like that like basic premise of drawing two on pull-up shooting, pick and rolls, where you're drawing two defenders out to the top of the key, opening the court for your drives and opening the space with storing gravity for everyone to be able to attack closeouts and finish around him is what the Magic need. And really just that high volume 3-point sniper is what a lot of teams need these days to really create enough space for everything else to work. So let's take a look at some of the plays the Hornets have been running, very close to some of the looks Duke is running with 5 out. We got some 5 slot actions to look at with the Hornets this season. So I'll pull that up here. There we go. And so, what do you see here? And, what makes the 5 slot so effective for Charlotte this year?
Yeah, like we sort of touched on some of these principles earlier going over Duke, but like what it's doing is you're opening the floor and driving lanes up for your best players. So in this look, instead of Cooper Flagg in the middle of the court, it's Brandon Miller, right? Like he's in that sort of like middle playmaker role. LaMelo's bringing it up on the right side of the court. Miller's in the middle, and you can see Grant Williams just lurking there. And it allows the Hornets to get into a bunch of different stuff, in part because, first off, just to back it up a little bit, the Hornets are running a lot of off either makes or misses. They're running a lot of double drag action, right? And they're doing it with mostly with LaMelo, but occasionally Brandon Miller, some Trey Mann too. And when they get to those double drag looks, they're often having one of the screeners be Miller, right? or be one of the, or like Seth Curry, one of the other guards. So they can, that's actually a good look at it. This is, from I think this is an exhibition game against New York. You got LaMelo double drag action. Miller sets that first screen. Then I think it's Richards there on the second screen. LaMelo is able to get to the pull up on that second clip. But so like it's a kind of, but if you actually, can you back up the clip to the start real quickly? Because like and then I'm going to ask you to like pause it in a second too. But yeah, if you get back to like pause it right here. Like see where Miller, it's the same setup, right? It's LaMelo dribbling up the right side of the court. It's Miller in the middle, and you got the center. It's Richards on this possession. So it looks the same, right? Like it looks identical. So it's like, are they going to go into the double drag, or are they going to throw it to Miller, and then Richards can step up and set a little ball screen, or they can flow into, or they can have Richards set that early flare screen for Miller. So it's the same. Like it looks like it could flow a bunch of different ways. You're just getting into reads. On this time, you're going to get into the double drag action. LaMelo comes across both, and it's Miller for the pop three. And like this play has been available for them often this season. That's a great. It's like a perfect play for the for the Hornets.
Yeah, I really like how like obviously your personnel affects your play choices, and like obviously some plays are just better made for players that have these certain skills. So like running a double drag with LaMelo at point and Brandon Miller setting the screen and popping just takes advantage of their best skills. Like it maximizes what they can bring to the court instead of asking, instead of asking him to create out of nothing and just go get a bucket, set Brandon Miller up for a pick and pop. And if it's there, he's got an open three. And like you mentioned, you can flow into other looks, and maybe LaMelo keeps it for a pull-up jumper or whatever it may be.
Yep. I mean, the hope would eventually to have Mark Williams be the other screener, right? So all of a sudden it's Miller setting the first screen, Williams in the second screen. Then that way you're touching you've got a live ball opportunity with LaMelo. You've got the rim threat, and you've got the pop. So yeah, here we go. It's the same thing. Again, they're doing this nonstop going back to the preseason here, but just flowing into that double drag look. And Melo, nice job attacking, drop coverage. For him, that was, or especially early in his career, that was such like a problem area for him. And it can still be sometimes too. He's likely to settle for like a floater or a runner. He loves taking those sort of like extended runners from like 17, 19 feet out. So it's great to see him continue to be patient, get downhill, and then finish, through contact at the rim. It's, that's like what you've always wanted to see from him, honestly.
No doubt. And then there's that lob threat, vertical gravity to Nick Richards on this one. That's what you're talking about, especially once Mark Williams come back, like another guy where he'll be in his most effective slot.
Yep.
And it's, at a certain point, it's pick your poison for the defense until they can figure out what to do to actually stop all three main actions. And that's when the counter punches comes in. So that's the beautiful chess game of the sport here.
And having two guys like Miller and LaMelo with that size that can shoot, if they see drop coverage and they're coming off of a ball screen, like that's going up from deep. Like Miller showed that his rookie season. Obviously, like he's more dangerous off the catch, but like, yeah, he's got the pull up, component to his game as well.
Yeah, and like drop coverage is not outdated yet, but like to me, if you're playing drop against a pull up shooter, it's begging for disaster. Like it's like it's one of those things where over the entire course of a game or even a season, yeah, it's probably still the safest, like best defense to get the, like obviously like the floater is the toughest shot or one of the least efficient shots in basketball. But everything is context based. If you're playing against Trae Young, that's his money shot. Like that's his go-to. He's the floater king. So if you're giving up floaters and pull up threes to someone who specializes in it, it's just not the best defense in my opinion. But obviously, over the aggregate, it probably does make sense and help you force the most tough shots because basketball is a game about picking your poison and you can't necessarily game plan every single team, every single night, top to bottom, like you can maybe in a playoff series where you really attack a team's deficits over and over.
Yep. And so this play against Indiana, this is from the other day. Again, it's 5 out, delay with Salon, the rookie, initiating in the middle of the court. Once again, the Hornets have the 5. This time it's Taj Gibson, space to that left wing. Get the initial down screen for Josh Green. He curls into the paint. And then off that, you're going to then get an elbow touch to Gibson. Then Salon's going to cut off that. And now here's where you get into the, whether you want to call it Zoom action or Chicago action, where you're going to get Miller setting a down screen for LaMelo, who then sprints into the handoff with Gibson. There's the Zoom or the Chicago action. And once again, sort of similar to the double drag play we just watched, you're getting LaMelo, a ball handling opportunity with some momentum, and with Miller on the pop action, right? Because after he sets that pin down, he's not just floating around. I mean, he moves back up to the court. Indiana has 2 on the ball, right? They've got Obi Toppin up at the level. So Jarris Walker's going to have to, comes off of Miller, a little bit, doesn't really make a great effort to get back out. Open catch and shoot 3 for Miller. I mean, that's like really good process, and involvement of their 2 best players in the half court for Charlotte.
For sure. And to hit on some of these keywords, so delay means they kind of left it to the trailer as they came up the court.
I think yes, but I think you can just use it like any sort of like 5 out, basically. It's just 5 out offense with a front court person initiating in the middle of the court. It's become like interchangeable with that, at least from my vantage point.
Right. And then the pin down elbow is almost the distraction going on up here.
Exactly. It's the down. I mean, I think they will look for Green off that. You got to be able to honor that stuff, right? Like Green, they'll occasionally throw it to him on the curl. He'll try to get downhill or whatever. But for the most part, that's just to get the defense moving, get this elbow touch, and then get to this action with LaMelo and Miller.
Right, and you mentioned, Zoom is or Chicago, just another way to get the best out of these players' best skills. Very similar to double drag. You got 2 screens. Mm-hmm. This time it's a pin down handoff instead of a pick and roll from the top. Yeah. But LaMelo still got the ball coming off 2 screens, and he draws 2. Somebody's open. Yeah. Bang bang.
2 on the ball. Move it around. It just so happens it finds a great shooter, and that's another. Not to keep banging this drum, but that's another one of those plays, man. Like if it's Mark Williams out on the roller there, then you're pressuring even more parts of the floor, especially the rim, which is the most dangerous area to hit at. But yeah, so here we go. This is the play I think we were going to start with. So again, it's going to looks like it could be that double drag look, right? Like LaMelo has the ball on the right. It looks like he could dribble left off of the initial screen from Brandon Miller, and then the second screen from Grant Williams. But instead, what you're going to get is Miller cutting off a little flare screen from Grant Williams. And then. Yeah, you can either look for the catch and shoot 3, which I guess Miller gets to there, and then here, Miller just gets the catch and shoot 3 off that. But if the shot isn't there, and here it is for LaMelo Ball with Trey Mann initiating, then they can flow right. They're going to rescreen and flow into a middle ball screen. LaMelo gets the pull up 3 too. So just like bang bang, lots of quick screening actions, all early in the shot clock. And it's a good way to highlight, again, sort of like the key strength of Charlotte's offense, which is like these tall shooters with LaMelo and Miller. And I sort of glossed over Mann earlier, but his ability to play create has been huge for them. And his ability, because of that, when they pair him with LaMelo, that allows LaMelo to get into some of these attacking guard looks is really important. And Mann has been, we don't have enough time to sort of go into how impactful he's been for them, but he looks like a guy that's going to get, he's going to be a restricted free agent this offseason. And, it looks like he's in line for a payday. I'm hopeful that Charlotte will retain him. But he's been quite good.
No doubt. Yeah. I was just talking with Charlie Cummings about him for his finding a role piece where he got this opportunity with LaMelo out last year, finally got a real look to a real role to just take the ball and do what he can. And this year he's like 4th or 5th in bench scoring. He's like you mentioned, showed some real development as a passer as well as a creator instead of just the bucket, because he's clearly a bucket. He's clearly a tough shot maker. Mm-hmm. I love his pull-up shooting. I was high on him in the draft because of that. I just really like that tough shot making.
The space creation with him is ridiculous.
Yeah, the body control.
There's no, I don't think there's. It's kind of cool because Kemba Walker is back on the coaching. He's back in Charlotte. He's on the coaching staff. I'm not sure I've seen anyone, and so I think that's been very good for LaMelo. But I'm not sure I've seen anyone, at least certainly not in a Hornets uniform, that gets like lower on like step back, the little like pullback crossover move. I mean, Mann is like ridiculous. Like his knee is basically scraping the court, and his chin is like right there too. But Kemba was the same way. And yeah, the ability, those guys, the ability to create space with those pullbacks, step back moves. I mean, like it's a one that like looks cool, but it's just very, very hard to do it as well as those two guys do it. And it speaks to their skill, their level of body control. And I'm glad Mann bet on himself. I mean, part of me would have liked to have seen Charlotte try to like lock him into like, a little like cost certainty deal. And I'm not sure how much momentum there, as with an extension ahead of the last season of his rookie contract. This is year 4 for him. They didn't get done. I don't know how much momentum there was on either side for that. And, we'll see, I guess, what the restricted free agency market looks like for him, assuming he continues to ball out like this. But, like, that kind of, like, pick and roll or one-on-one creation is really hard to find. It's really, really hard to find. And if you have someone like that, you kind of need to find a role for them. Oklahoma City, it's a little different because they just had – you have SGA, you have all these other guards. But what I will say with Mann is as satisfying as the pull-up shooting is, I think one of the things for him that makes him so compelling, and this is something that I give some credit, or maybe a lot of credit actually to like Oklahoma City from a player dev standpoint. Like Oklahoma City, Steve Jones talks about this all the time on the Dunker Spot. Oklahoma City is going to drive the basketball, right? Steve has been saying this for years about OKC. And it was hilarious when Micic and Mann got to Charlotte last year because all of a sudden it was like, oh man, they have two guys that actually want to drive the basketball. That injection of like live ball rim pressure was incredible. After watching 60 games of Terry Rozier and Ish Smith, it jumped off the page, and it was my first exposure getting to see Mann play a lot since his sophomore season at Florida, and it was. If you were watching the Hornets in March, April last year, you knew there was something there. Like it was pretty obvious. But he's totally blossoming, and I would say he's probably someone that's also benefiting from some of these 5-slot concepts because again, it's opening up the lane for drives, and like he will take guys on one-on-one and look to get downhill. That's one of the things that makes the step back so threatening is that he can actually leverage it with his dribble drive game.
Yeah, and like you said, that advantage creation, like it's not just the ability to make a tough shot, but to create it, to be able to actually make enough space to get to the angle that he can make. And like that's clearly like at the minimum, if you have no defense on top of that, like that's at least a bench role. And if you bring a little bit of defense and you can actually guard your own position or switch a little bit, you're trying, there's a chance to be a starter who can score consistently because the scoring is always valuable. And not just putting the ball in the hoop, but being able to make the space to take the shots that you're comfortable with. So, that's what really makes him polarizing player here. And this might be him.
Yeah, comes off
on this one.
Yep. Then gets to create and pick and roll here. Bends the defense and kicks it out to LaMelo. Again, those guys getting to play off each other is like pretty cool. So yeah, he comes off the flare. It flows back into that middle ball screen. He gets to kind of just cook against drop coverage. Boston, they're always going to peel in and show early help. LaMelo does a nice job spacing out. Again, that's just those two guys playing off of one another. And similar to, they're using Miller and Mann in these plays like kind of interchangeably, right? Like if it's double drag, Mann's going to set the ball screen, for LaMelo and pop out the way Brandon Miller was. But when they get into that little flare screen off of the 5-slot action, then they can look for Mann. He can get to the catch and shoot. If it's not there, then you go ahead and flow right into pick and roll and play out of it. So ultimately, I don't want to speak for Charles Lee, but just talking to John Shire, Duke's coach, about this stuff, like they just want to get guys into reads. You know what I mean? Ultimately, they know they've got these guys are talented. You're going to space the floor for them. You're going to put them in good spots, but like they want those guys to be basketball players. and to really like, get comfortable, develop chemistry, and then sort of like use that to amplify how they're able to like flow into these things, as opposed to having everything be schemed and drawn up. You know what I mean? And I would like to find this as like organized offense, but like it is also guys just like making plays and just going through the progressions and then letting the skill and shot making take over.
Yeah, I mean, that's basketball at large is, trying to make plays, be unscripted in the scripted actions, and especially, at its best, letting these basketball geniuses actually think the game in live time and setting them up in a scheme where there are multiple options, there are multiple logical choices and reads to go through, and then just letting them be creative. And obviously LaMelo is as creative as it gets. So, you see it one more time here, this time through a little bit different, running Brandon Miller through the gut. So,
yep. And he flows into that little handoff action too. But yeah, here, let's watch it. If we can watch it one more time. Yeah, this flare screen for him, not there. Throw it to Grant. And then Miller, cycles through, back up the middle of the lane. And he's able to get into his pull-up game. He's a very good mid-range shooter too. So again, just like different options you can get into out of it when you have these kinds of like tall, shot makers that can all handle the basketball too. And with the good spacing and principles and reads that come with this concept. So, and again, Miller as an off-ball mover is like really pretty special.
It's big. And like they try to switch everything here, but like I think is it Drew? It's kind of small, but like
it might be Peyton, I think, or at the top on Grant. No, it's probably Drew. I think it's Drew. It's like Drew at the point of attack.
Yeah,
he switches. I think it's Jordan Walsh that switches to LaMelo, or actually no, it's Derek White. Forgive me.
Okay, so all I was thinking here is like, if that's Drew, he switches like 3 times, and I think Brandon Miller might even read that top foot and see a little bit of space, because that little hezzy creates the space, and that's all he needs to be open at the elbow. And Drew to me is the best perimeter defender of the last decade. Like he's up there with anybody. So like he's the guy you want at point of attack, switching everything. But Miller recognizes the switch. Little hezzy, attacks the top foot, and there's enough space to get to his midi pull-up. So
the jab is really nice there for Miller, which you highlighted. And like for a guy like Miller, like he's not a big separation guy. Because like Holiday recovers and puts on a pretty good contest, but like Miller has that kind of like Chris Middleton like ability just to like shoot over the top of guys, like get to his spots, and again just have like the size and length to shoot over the top. And again, Miller's. He's a talented shot maker, man. He really is.
No doubt. That's a beautiful stutter rip there, as PD Webb likes to point out. Boom. There it is. And that tall shot release, a tall, tough shot maker that fades a little bit. I mean, it's just so hard to block that shot. So we got one last action or combination of actions here. The ghost double exit, which is an ATO.
I don't know what the Hornets are calling this. Obviously, this is just sort of like me going through the different actions on the play and sort of what I'm looking at here. But they've run this a lot. They ran it against Philadelphia again the other night too. But usually they'll use this with LaMelo and one of the small guards, either Curry or Mann. So you can see they've got like 4 guys flat along the baseline, and then the small guard is going to come up from the weak side corner, and they're going to sort of look like they're going to set like a run out, guard ball screen. But instead they're going to ghost and sort of like flare out to that left wing. And while all of that's happening, I think that's Cody Martin in the left corner. He's going to run the baseline and come off these 2 like exit screens in the direction, or smack screens, whatever you want to call them, those little like pin-ins along the baseline as Trey Mann is going in that direction. And ultimately it's not LaMelo, forgive me, it's Trey Mann handling there. But ultimately, like the ghost screen, that's what they use to sort of, at least create a little bit of confusion at the point of attack. And the 2 exit screens along the baseline, that's just tying up, the defenders along the back line, occupying them, and it lets Mann cook wide open in the middle of the court.
It's almost like they just distract every other help defender, so Mann can just get an ISO
in the middle. Yeah, exactly.
go to work because Trey is here to get a bucket. Everyone else is too distracted on all these side actions.
And you can see his like the handle and the footwork and the coordination and body control. I mean, he is just like, there's the pullback move. Then what a play. I actually haven't rewatched this play since this game. It's really crazy stuff from Mann.
Man, between the headband and the crossovers, it's bringing back a little AI out there.
That's what he's going for. That's what he's going for. That's for sure.
You gotta love it. You gotta love it. And so there's one more similar type set here. It's a nice ATO set, and this must have been the first time they've actually
called it. It's Seth Curry running out, and then LaMelo throws it to him. LaMelo gets knocked down there too. It's the same thing. You've got Trey Mans now. He's in the corner. He's running the baseline off the exit screens. Seth Curry, he's ghosting out to that left wing. And I mean, Curry's a little limited as a player, but he's a ridiculous shooter. And he gets a wide open catch and shoot look there off the ghost read with LaMelo.
And so the ghost is basically a slip screen as the guard runs up to slip. He just slips right out and ghosts almost like flaring into a three. And then
staying along the perimeter usually. It's just sort of like how I always also think of ghost, as opposed to just sort of like outright calling it a slip. But it's basically the same. It's essentially the same thing. A blur is another word that people will use to describe this stuff. And as those guard-to-guard screening actions have become like more pervasive across all levels of basketball, these kinds of like ghost slip screens are really, really powerful. LaMelo and Terry Rozier were awesome with these kinds of things. Sort of like during like the heyday of those guys playing together.
Yeah, I mean when two guards. Yeah, I mean, two guards being able to like hit the catch and shoot and also attack the closeout with their handle and all that, like it makes the slip super powerful, almost like a pick and pop, but before they even set to do it. And then the double exit aspect, is that like basically the stagger screen on the baseline?
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to it as. And again, I don't know how Charlotte would define it, but I think of it as those types of screens that are being set for someone who's running the baseline, and so it's like being set for them to, for Mann to like come out into the corner and in theory like get a catch and shoot three. So that's going to pull a bunch of defenders with him, like his defender that's running the baseline with him, and then maybe like a screen defender. I mean, Adebayo doesn't really go with it. He like sniffs it out, but it doesn't. For the Hornets, it's fine because the action's staying on the left side of the floor. Like you can try to pass it to the guy there for a corner three, but ultimately that's just being done to, I think, like tie up and occupy those backline help defenders. You see teams, at every level running those like exit screens as sort of like a secondary component of a lot of their like pick and roll sets, and often it's being done with a non-shooter. The non-shooter setting the exit screen for a shooter running the baseline just to free things up in the middle of the court. For spread pick and roll.
Yeah, and a lot of fans might not recognize how much of these plays are a little bit scripted, where like they might just see the end, like, oh, he slipped a screen and hit the 3-pointer. They're not even thinking that all this stuff is going off the ball, that the defense has to consider everything an option until it actually happens. So they're worried about the side, while the other side, it's just kind of meant to keep them busy while the main action happens on the other side. So looks like there might be a couple more versions of it here before we out of here. But, another double exit on the baseline, another ghost up top, and
LaMelo just switch this time, and then he gets to work against Hero. I mean, that's just one of the other things you can generate off that action.
There you go. LaMelo sees the barbecue chicken. Hero picking him up on the switch. Yep. That's a quick bucket for LaMelo Ball right there. Float it. So we got it one more time here.
Yep, same thing. This time to the Mann. He sets the go screen.
And this time he does hit the guy using the double exit on the side here. So
exactly.
And he drives pretty early there too, a little decisive.
Goes to Bridges, and then they can just get into 5-out handoff reads and stuff like that. Or I guess it's Williams, not. Eventually flows into. That's going to end up being like the last second progression for the Hornets. A lot of stuff is like find LaMelo, get him into a handoff and flow into pick and pop or pick and roll out of it.
Yeah. And just to end it on a Grant Williams rant, he hit the most yes step back three I've ever seen last night against Orlando. I was livid. I mean, he tried one early and we were all like, no chance, and he missed completely. And then he tried it again and he drills this step back three like it's nothing. It's like, what? How's that happening?
He's not
in his game.
He doesn't create a lot of space with the
step back. He's just a very unique player.
He's good. Like I liked him in the 2019 draft. It's been interesting getting to watch him more in Charlotte. He's definitely weird, but he is like useful. And like he helps them out. He does a lot for them.
Late last season, a smart player out there.
Yeah, can be a hub in the high post. Shoots it enough to space and run pick and pop. Short roll passer, and then he's got some defensive versatility to his game too.
Absolutely. So, man, we have hit on some fun actions, a lot of 5 out, 5 slot, some ghost double exits, all these modern sets that I hope the listeners are excited to hear about. And it is a cool crossover to kind of see them implemented at the college and the pro level. And it happens to be with the teams that you cover. So, I hope we get to see a full season of LaMelo hitting that Stardom, comes right back. That'd be a lot of fun. And hopefully we finally get him and Mark Williams and Brandon Miller, kind of a nice trio there, some minutes together, some good reps. And maybe they keep that pick. I mean, Cooper Flagg is at the top of the draft.
Yeah, it would be. Can
you imagine? That'd be a perfect fit right there.
I got to see Cooper Flagg and Brandon Miller. They played with each other with the select team, with Team USA this summer.
Okay.
Definitely got a few of those clips that from that experience. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, Flagg would obviously be like the best case scenario, but this draft looks pretty awesome. As far as like
absolutely
go. So. But Flagg would be obviously like, as far as like big wing creator, he would fit.
No doubt. Are there any other prospects that pop out that you think would fit pretty nice with this core?
I think there's a few.
There's a bunch of 2 guards that could kind of slide in there.
Like I think Dylan Harper is interesting as sort of like a rim pressure. They could really use like a strong like advantage creator type guy, like someone with some muscle.
For sure.
And maybe that's it's like. You already have LaMelo and Miller. Those guys want to play with the ball a lot. But ultimately, I think they need to get a guy that can be like sort of like a strong, like sort of like a muscular source of rim pressure, like a mismatch guy.
And we didn't talk about it much, but LaBaron, or at all yet, but I was going to quickly ask you, and I might mispronounce his name here, but LaBaron Philon for Alabama.
Philon.
Bringing make some heads-up plays. Like he
his speed obviously is just ridiculous. I mean, if he's in a great system and with Alabama's Moneyball approach down there, they've got a lot of great shooters and players on that roster. They look like a team that could maybe win the title this season. And they've got several guys that with the ball in their hands are just like a 4.40, and Philon is probably the fastest of all of them. But like Aiden Holloway, who transferred in from Auburn, like he's there too. Philon, he really like lit it up in the scrimmage they had back in October against Wake Forest, but just the functional strength, the handle, the speed, the ability to sort of like get off the ball, move around, relocate, get back onto it. I like his feel, and the physical tools when he has the ball are ridiculous. So
some really good two-way feel, and like
he looks unbelievable. Yeah, he looks unbelievable for Alabama to start the season.
Yeah, definitely has some smart feel to his game and good footwork, good downhill like force type of stuff. And another guy I think might fit well, obviously, is like VJ Edgecombe. Like he brings that downhill north-south attack that they could kind of use a little bit of that, just like
his athleticism,
high flying slasher next to attacking closeouts off these guys.
He's actually a really good name to throw out is Edgecombe because slashing wing with that type of athleticism, that would actually fit quite nicely with sort of like the pieces that Charlotte has. Like he would just be a nice like copy and paste into the young core with them.
Absolutely, no doubt. So we hope to see him, or maybe worlds collide, and you get that Cooper Flagg walking right over to Charlotte, stays in the state, and gets to to join the Hornets. Maybe the lottery balls fall Charlotte's way this time around, and you get that defensive maniac at the 4 that just would be an absolute money fit and huge win for Charlotte. But either way, exciting team. Duke is loaded. Can't wait to see where they end up. One of the most talented teams in the country. And, more importantly, I appreciate you taking the time today, being able to talk some hoops. Always a lot of fun. And appreciate you breaking down these clips. And, hitting both teams. I was just say, check out Brian's Substack, Split the Action, and, catch him calling these games for High Point.
Yeah. Those games are all on ESPN Plus. I'm back next week. They play for their game against American University. Very excited for that. I've got a few more going into the season, but co-host the BuzzBeat podcast. You can find that on any podcast app where you get your pods from. We're doing pods a little less frequently this year because a good friend of mine, one of the co-hosts, Richie Randall, is just life with work and family has gotten very busy for him. So we're having to just sort of like scale things back a little bit, but still doing lots of Hornets content there. Freelance writer covering college hoops in the draft for 247 Sports. Popped up at Fansided, SB Nation, a few other places. And then, appreciate you mentioning. I'm trying to build up the Substack a little bit. Split the Action, lots of like college hoops, X and O's, scouting, that kind of stuff. And I'm sort of hoping to, as the season gets rolling, to sort of like get more stuff pumping there. But put out stuff this week on Wake Forest, playing through the elbow, their split action that they're running off of that, and then sort of like what's working for NC State so far this season as they're trying to build off of last season's Final Four appearance.
Absolutely, and shout out Richie. Hope everything's good with the fam and with life. Does some great work on a BuzzBeat pod.
He is Richie Randall. One, he's an excellent reporter, excellent basketball mind. He's also just like the best podcast audio producer I've ever worked with. So truly like one of the GOATs. Love Richie.
Hey, bringing the skills. Well, shout out to y'all. Got to check out Brian's work on all these different platforms. And once again, appreciate you taking the time today.
Anytime. It was a lot of fun coming on, and hopefully join sometime later this season.
Yeah, make it happen again, no doubt. Have a good one, Brian. Learning Basketball is a Swish Theory podcast hosted from beyond the arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com.